Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires, and today I am answering a question. We've got a few of these queued up, by the way, so if you are someone who has asked for a video, specifically for Vampire the Masquerade, there are a few in the list. We have videos coming up regarding Kindred of the Ebony Kingdom, we've got a video coming up regarding Clan Nosferatu, we've got a video coming up regarding Revenants in Vampire the Masquerade. All of these are in the list. This one came first, and it is very nicely timed. It is requested by a man by the name of Steve. I've not been given permission to say your surname, so we'll just go for Steve. Mr. Steve. Mr. Steve picked up a physical copy of The World Below, which, as you well know at this point, if you buy a copy of The World Below in physical form from DriveThruRPG or through BackerKit, links to do so are below, you can request a video. And Steve wanted to know what kind of Vampire the Masquerade Chronicles would I run today. And I asked Steve, what do you mean today as opposed to any other time? And Steve basically said, well, given you have spent so much time working on Vampire the Masquerade and you've ran so much Vampire the Masquerade, how is it that you still have ideas for Vampire the Masquerade? What do you run now that you wouldn't have run before? And this was a really interesting question, a chance to examine the kind of games I would have run in the past compared to what I would run now. A chance to look at burnout and getting tired of running a game and what I might bring newly to it after having worked on things like V5 and all the board games and the video game work and so forth. And I've spent a little bit of time pondering it, especially as within the last 2 months I have started up lots of new Vampire Chronicles. You see, and I've mentioned this in another video or two, that for a good 2 years, maybe longer, I didn't touch Vampire the Masquerade. I made videos about it occasionally for this YouTube channel, and I'd speak to people about it if they wanted to, but I was pretty much done with Vampire. And that isn't because I hated the game or because I was bitter towards the game. There is a narrative out there that I was bitter towards it. It's more that I just I've said this before, I spent about 20-something years of my life running or playing Vampire in various forms. There was rarely a month that went by that I did not run or play it in some way. Some of them were very, very long chronicles, sometimes it was one-shot, sometimes it was going to a convention and running a game across several days, sometimes it was going to LARPs, or I was writing for Vampire the Masquerade, or I was developing Vampire the Masquerade, or even translating Vampire the Masquerade, which I did for Arcane Asylum, for the French language books. But that is, that can lead to a certain saturation point. And yeah, I reached that saturation point where I didn't really want to carry on doing Vampire. I had spent so much of my time with it. I genuinely felt like I had seen every permutation of a Vampire Chronicle that I could ever hope to see. I feel and felt like every character you could throw at me, I had seen a version of. It didn't matter if you were a new player or not, or maybe that's a little harsh, maybe it's a little jaded. But I felt like I'd seen every damn Malkavian, every True Brew pretending to be a Torrid, every last Cappadocian, and of course every Ventrue stockbroker, every Zimishi psychopath, veterinarian. But there were more nuanced characters than all of those. But the point is, I had seen an awful lot of Vampire the Masquerade. So I was ready to give it a break. And in the past, the kind of Vampire Chronicles I would run really ran the gamut. By which, I mean, I would run personal horror stories, I'd run epic chronicles that dealt with antediluvians and vast swathes of meta-plot. I would have city-spanning chronicles, globe-spanning chronicles. Beckett's Jihad Diary, which I co-developed with Neil Raymond Price, was very much a culmination of all the loads of ideas I had ran at some point, or written down at some point, or taken from books at some point, and ultimately added to this book. So it's not like I didn't touch certain ideas in Vampire. In fact, I would say I touched pretty much every damn part of Vampire the Masquerade, external and internal. It was a deep cavity Vampire the Masquerade exploration, those 20-odd years. And yet now I have returned to it. In the last couple of months, I've started up 4 new Chronicles of Vampire. I don't dip a toe into things to see whether I like it. I just dive straight in. And so I currently have on the go a Miami game. Our Miami 1980 Vampire the Masquerade Chronicle is seeing our coterie in a very shaky Camarilla Miami that's practically more anarch than Camarilla at this point. There is a nominal prince, a paper prince, but there are princelings scattered around Miami and the Floridian area who basically control their crews, control their territory, and nominally defer to the central prince, who is little more than a figurehead. But at some point, it's highly likely it's going to break into all-out anarch turf war, and the Sabbat are just on the edge, pushing things in that direction because, well, they want Miami for themselves. And it's set in 1980 to take advantage of speedboats, wide collars, cocaine, gang warfare, everything that Miami is good for at the time. Even despite the nighttime setting, everyone is still covered, all the mortals anyway, in glistening coatings of sweat. There is constant mambo being played on the beaches. There's tiki bars everywhere you can see, despite the fact we're in Florida. There is basically everyone's drinking out of a coconut and living like it's their last night. You've got incursions from Haitian gangs, from Cubans, from Dominicans, and of course, yes, you have the vampire politics of the time as well. So that's one chronicle, Miami in the 1980s. Then we've got Berlin in 1989, the Ivory Wall. Now, some of you are going to be familiar with the fact that I ran a chronicle called the Ivory Wall on this YouTube channel over a decade ago at this point, and I think it is still visible. I think you can still find it on this channel. I privatized, that is to say made private, various videos on this YouTube channel, but I don't think the Ivory Wall is one such series. But it was a setting I really wanted to explore a lot more of, especially as the coterie I'm running for want to be based in East Berlin. Now, I've got no notes from my previous Ivory Wall campaign, nothing. Anything that I might have written back then is long since gone. So I get to build it all from the ground up, but from the other perspective. And we're starting this chronicle out with something of a murder mystery, taking inspiration from such crime dramas as The Bridge, where there is a body found in the no man's land, the neutral ground between sections of the wall, east and west. And this is a ghoul of Prince Gustav Breidenstein of East Berlin, who may have been ferrying something from east to west, may have been a double agent. We have yet to find out. Our coterie has basically got to get the body back, find out who killed him, and hopefully not trigger some all-out war between East and West as the wall is on the verge of coming down. And we've got a character who is in the Stasi. We have, well, in fact, we've got more than one character who's in the Stasi, though for different reasons. We've got some black market traffickers in the group as well, representing different interests. It's quite a grim and dark and grey and spy who came in from the cold, kind of drizzly chronicle in terms of atmosphere. Everyone's paranoid, everyone's watching each other. The Camarilla of East Berlin is Stasified. You know, there is a hell of a lot of paranoia going on. And Prince Breidenstein's child or descendant, who is nominal Prince of West Berlin, is leaning increasingly anarch, at least in terms of the freedoms that he is allowing other kindred to celebrate, at least as far as Breidenstein's concerned. So there is a philosophical or political divide between both sides of Berlin. So we've got that going on. We also have the Transylvania Chronicles. I'm running Transylvania Chronicles for the first time in many, many, many years, with, of course, my own tweaks, my own adjustments. I have said to people on many occasions that those who complain about the published Vampire the Masquerade Chronicles, Giovanni, Transylvania, very rarely Ventru, because most people don't realise Ventru Chronicle exists, have got it all wrong. I am prepared to die on this hill that these chronicles are in fact very well written for the time. And people who say, well, they just place the NPCs as the stars and the characters are on the sidelines watching, what they're actually dealing with is really weak storytellers. I don't mind coming out and just saying that outright at this point instead of hedging my bets. If you as a storyteller are reading things from the page and not adapting them for your group, and specifically for the types of characters they're playing, their motivations, their fears, their allies, their objectives, then you are not running Vampire the Masquerade very well. You're just reading them a story and expecting them to spectate. So then going around to complain that the book doesn't do what you need it to, or the players complaining, Transylvania Chronicles didn't give us a lot of freedom. No, it's the storyteller who doesn't. Approaching Transylvania Chronicles for the first time properly in well over a decade has given me the capacity to see this, and it's basically allowed me to review things like Giovanni as well. There is a hell of a lot of good material in all of these published chronicles. And yes, just like any other published adventure, if you run it verbatim, you will find that it is a strict, linear, characters off to the sideline story. But that is because Vampire, as a role-playing game, has always struggled with published adventures in the sense that Vampire is a largely social game, a Machiavellian game. People will betray each other, people will make negotiations, people will intimidate, people will go off track very, very quickly just from saying the wrong thing. And you cannot account for that when writing a chronicle. You especially can't account for it when running a chronicle. So I think Transylvania Chronicles is actually very good, and I am now running it and finding it to be very good. We have our characters in Transylvania, various of them from outside of Transylvania, it must be said. We have a wandering Moorish mercenary. We have a lord of the domain, a sort of hoary old Ventru. We have a freshly embraced Salubri, who was basically embraced out of shame or guilt, or maybe as a chance of rescuing her. Motivations are nebulous at this time. We have a scholarly follower of Set who is on the path of Lilith, someone who is really trying to open his mind to different philosophies and religions. And we have a Basarab Revenant as well, who is currently assigned to that follower of Set as his, well, dog's body, to put it kindly, but also bodyguard, because the follower of Set is in turn working for Prince Oradu of Bistritz. Basically, this is a really interesting coterie that on paper shouldn't work well together, but is very, very interesting to see. And we've had them travel to Budapest and meet their sponsor and so forth and get the wheels turning on the main plot of the Chronicle. But it is a lot of fun setting us in the late 12th century and seeing where things go from there. Finally, I've got a Dark Ages game set in the British Isles, in the south, in the domain of Thorns, my personal favourite. Typically, if I need to run a game at short notice, if it's Vampire the Masquerade, I will set it in Thorns. It's a nice fictional domain, roughly in the location of Basingstoke in the real world, and because I have ran games there so often, I can basically tell stories set in Thorns just like that. I know the vampires, I know the morsels, I know the layout of the town. Everything comes very intuitively, and we're running this game like Cadfael. It's in the 13th century. A monk has been found hanging and mutilated from the bell tower, his death signalled by the tolling of the bell when his body was presumably strung up. The vampires found him. They are now of the suspicion that there is a vampire in this small domain who they don't know about, who might be preying on others, or it could be something else, some kind of dreamlike manifestation that this maybe torpid vampire is projecting from her current state. There aren't many K-Knights in this game. Like most Dark Ages games I run, it's more about isolation than a massive panoply of K-Knights and their clans. I always prefer Dark Ages games to feel more restricted in terms of, well, you've got the urban environment and beyond that, miles and miles of darkness. Because you're only operating at night, there are no light sources out there. All you have is the dark for miles and miles. And eventually you might reach somewhere safe. Eventually you might. But there's very likely going to find K-Knights who are also very territorial over the domain you arrive in. Why are you here? What do you want? So, in this confined domain of Thorns, we have this murder that's taken place with K-Knight overtures. It might start incensing the mob, might start drawing the eyes of certain inquisitorial elements. And in this game, we have a Tremere alchemist, a bastard son of British nobility. We have a Nosferatu who strives toward grace. He is an architect. He builds churches, cathedrals, sepulchres, and the like, and wishes to build higher and higher to reach heaven, except he is mostly digging out catacombs because of his shame. We have a Brujar knight who is freshly returned from the Crusades to meet with his brother Thomas, who sadly is the person who's just been found hanging from Belfry. And yes, we have another character joining very, very soon. What is different about these Chronicles to what I would have ran over a decade ago, or 5 years ago, or even 2 decades ago? The main difference in style for my running that I can identify is everything is a lot more character focused now. When I used to run games, I used to be a lot heavier on this is the story is moving, we need to stay focused on what the story is. But what I've learned increasingly as I've grown as a storyteller, as a GM, is players want to tell their stories. Not all of them, some of them are just along for the ride, but most players create a character with a certain story, a certain objective, a certain ambition in mind. And so I take note of these things. It's something we sort of bake into games like Curseborn and The World Below over Onyx Path. But for Vampire, it's something I've definitely taken to heart, that you need to focus on each of the characters. And at each session, a character needs to achieve something that is personal to them, that's important to them, because it makes the player feel like, wow, that was a fantastic game. They're gonna think that less when you drop the big Methuselah with the backstory on them than when they finally reunite with their long-lost relative, or when they discover the gravestone that was made for them and it turns out everyone has assumed they're dead for all this time. When they achieve that little bit of territory, grab that bit of territory they've been striving for all their mortal life, and now they have it in undeath, can they still utilize it in the same way? That kind of thing. But you'll also notice all of these games are set in the past. The one thing I am certain of throughout all of this is, while I've always been a fan of running Dark Ages games and historic games, I am definitely no longer interested in running modern era games. And it isn't because I hold with the idea that mobile technology subdues horror. I think there's plenty of horror to be found in mobile technology, don't worry. It's just, I find that if I want to see interesting characters now, they need to come out of a historical context. When players examine history, whether it's through pop culture, a media lens like Miami Vice or something for our 1980s Miami Masquerade game, they bring certain fashions, certain culture, certain attitudes that may not exist in the 21st century. And that immediately adds layers. Sometimes they're stereotypical layers, but it immediately adds layers to characters that might otherwise be lacking in a setting of today. And by spreading these games around, I've got a 12th century game, I've got a 13th century game, I've got 1980, I've got 1989. We get to see lots of different characters, or I do, in lots of different settings, at crucial historical points, and it makes things interesting to me, which, not to be too self-serving, is incredibly important to me running the game. I want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy the story. I want to enjoy the characters. And I'm far less likely to do that if the vampires I'm looking at in a modern era setting look like people I would normally meet today. I've met all of those characters. Maybe in the next couple of years, I will finally want to start running a game set in the 21st century again. But crucially, right now, all of these are using historic settings, and I'm really enjoying that. I'll tell you something else, and I'll close out the video this way. I've had a few people ask, well, what system do you use for Vampire these days? And I tell them V20. For Dark Ages, I use V20 Dark Ages. I have thoughts on V20 Dark Ages I might get into in another video. And for Masquerade era, or the 1980s ones, it's just V20. And it isn't because I dislike V5. It's just when I think of utility, bear in mind I contributed to V5. I love a lot about V5. But when I think about utility, when I think of ease of use, when I want a system that does exactly what I want it to, I go to V20 because it is simple, it's unintrusive, it has fewer bolt-on mechanics. What is a bolt-on mechanic? Well, in V5, they are flavor mechanics, things like resonance, things like predator types, things like, I don't know, blood potency. Some of these things exist in Requiem as well, don't get me wrong. But with V20, it is just your straight character sheet. If it isn't on your character sheet, it isn't part of the game. And that leads to a much easier road into the game, in my view, than V5, at least to me. But it may also be because I've been playing with that system far longer, and I'm just happy doing something that's simple for me. None of the players have objected, that's for sure, and I'm running for 4 different groups. So there we have it. I hope that answers your question, Steve, about the games I would run now. Mostly historical, using V20, well, all historical, using V20, and much more character-focused than plot-focused. And, yeah, it will be interesting to see where things go. Maybe I'll even open the doors again for Werewolf the Apocalypse at some point. But if you are interested in running, or playing, I should say, a World of Darkness game with me, you need to sign up to my Patreon. It is linked in the video description below. And if you want a video, you can, of course, buy a hard copy of The World Below. And by doing so, I will create a video of your choosing. You just need to contact me through MatthewDawkins.com with proof of your purchase, and I will make that video for you. Thank you very much for watching, and I will be seeing you next time.